your life sucks, it's your fault. It's no one else's fault except yours. I think our mindset prohibits us from being successful more than anything. Not having a victim mentality, because I had that for a while. I'm not going to make someone be quiet just because they're hurting my feelings. Minorities benefit from capitalism a lot, especially Hispanics that open up.
How's it, Waterbuffalotm?
3, 2, 1. Hey, what's going on, guys? Oldschool Matt here, back with another Waterbuffalo Training Method podcast. Today, we're joined by our lovely guest, Noelle Fitchett. She is a student at CSUF. It's a school in California. And without further ado, here she is, and I'll let her introduce herself a little bit before we get started.
Hi, thanks for having me. Super stoked. I'm a student from California. I talk about politics, and I filter that through the lens of my faith. I talk about it a lot on TikTok and Instagram. So
awesome. Yeah. So we don't, obviously me and Noelle don't know each other personally, but I saw her on a page and I thought her page was super dope. And then I ended up going out and checking all her other socials. She is kind of famous. So it's an honor to have a celebrity on our podcast. Probably the person with the most following on the podcast, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, she's got a super dope platform and she's been doing a lot of stuff during the election time. I kind of just wanted to ask you like one quick question, Noelle, before we kind of dive deep into things. Like, did you ever think that you would have a platform like this? Because you do have a pretty big audience on TikTok and you're starting to get a pretty big audience on Instagram too, as I see. Like, was this ever in the picture or is this kind of like a shock to you?
it's kind of a shock still. It was on accident. So I had posted a video talking about white privilege and stuff, and then I posted a video with my grandma, and so yeah, those videos kind of just blew up, and so that's where we're at now. I wasn't expecting it, so yeah.
Let's dive into this. So what was the video on white privilege about?
I basically talked about not having a victim mentality, because I had that for a while and I saw the decrease in my academic performance as well as just my social life and the impact that it has. And I think our mentality just really impacts every aspect of our life. And so I was talking about how just basically I can do anything that a white person can do, that my skin color doesn't hold me back from anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so that video actually got attention. I got a lot of hate, but it ended up blowing up. It like boosted me in the algorithm, so it helped me. And then I had posted a video with my grandma talking about the history of the Democratic Party, and so that kind of just like pushed me up more. And so it's been a roller coaster ever since. So
interesting. So you've definitely got a different perspective on things according to the pretty heated political climate that we have going on nowadays. So let's kind of, if you don't mind, let's kind of explore that. So like we were talking a little bit before the podcast, would you mind just sharing your like background, like what your ethnicity is and why, and I guess we can kind of tie that into that whole video and how it kind of made you go viral as well, because I'm sure that has a big part in it.
yeah, for sure. So my mom's family is from Mexico. They did immigrate here. And my dad's family has actually been here for a long time, since the 1800s. My dad's ancestors were slaves. Their son, Curtis Spencer Fitchett, fought in the Civil War with the Union. After they won, he married someone who was Mexican. He was Black. And so our family's just been super diverse ever since then. And then my parents met. And so that's how I came about. So, yeah.
That's awesome. So like what exactly was the video that you made on white privilege? And for people that might not know, like what is white privilege? I'm sure like probably 60% of the people, maybe 70% of the people know what that is, but some people might be like, what the hell is white privilege?
Yeah. So prior to that video, when I was seeing everything going on with BLM and just a lot of people talking about racism, I asked my grandma to make a video with me, and basically she lived in Texas in the time when we had segregation. So they weren't allowed in movie theaters, they weren't allowed in diners. And so I remember talking to her off camera and I was like, Grandma, what do you think about everything? What do you think about the narrative that America's racist? And she said they don't know what racism is. They don't know what oppression is. And so I asked her to share her story. And so I recorded a video with her sharing her story. And someone left a comment saying they don't know what oppression is because they're not dark enough, and kind of just like brought up levels of skin tone. And so that led me to make the video about white privilege and basically what white privilege is. And I had to take a class on it at school. Basically, Peggy McIntosh coined the term white privilege, and it means that a white person has an invisible backpack of tools that inherently makes their life easier, that just allows you to be more successful. And so a lot of people buy into that because a lot of white people do tend to be wealthier, but then when you look at the history and you look at the demographics, a lot of it points back to a wealth privilege rather than a skin color privilege.
I agree with you.
And so I did a video talking about that. And after that, we just started talking about the history of the Democratic Party, the history of slaves. And so, yeah, that's basically what I did for that.
That's awesome. And so your grandma, she's half Mexican then? Or
My grandma's Native American, Mexican, and Black. So
she's
her,
that tri-blend? That's your dad's mom?
yeah. So they're super mixed. They've kind of married different races all throughout their time being here, which I think is pretty cool because that was really unique in their time, especially.
Yeah, that's awesome. What did you guys so with the stuff going on now, would she like coming obviously we're not talking to her, but from what you've talked to her about, does she feel like things are being a little bit overplayed nowadays with the whole racism stuff?
Yeah,
Or
definitely. She actually, because so she wasn't allowed in like movie theaters, diners, and even when segregation was made illegal, she only got to go to school up until 7th grade. She had to help her family pick cotton because they didn't have a lot of money. And so she wasn't informed on laws. She didn't know how things worked. So when segregation was made illegal, she didn't exercise her rights because Texas didn't really abide by those laws. They kind of still enforce segregation. So it wasn't until she left to California when she was 17. She went back to Texas to go visit, and that was the first time she went into a diner that had white people. And I asked her how it felt, and she was like, it felt so weird. And so now when we talk about racism in today's world and how a lot of young people especially are saying that there's systemic racism and oppression, she always says they don't know what that is because there's nothing in the law that's prohibiting them from doing anything. There's nothing that's keeping them from going into a store, accessing education. Sure, like minorities may have different struggles, but that doesn't prohibit them from being successful. I think our mindset prohibits us from being successful more than anything.
Definitely.
So.
I think that was a really good talking point right there, honestly. I wanted to ask you this question too. So you come from two different backgrounds. You come from like the Mexican heritage, which is like you said, your mom immigrated here, and then you come from obviously an African American heritage as well. Do you think that there's certain values in those cultures that kind of mix well together? Because like they're a little bit different, like obviously, but I think in certain people, there are certain aspects of both of those cultures that kind of have that kind of hard work mentality sort of thing, you know?
Yeah, so because a lot of our family history was lost from my dad's side, they were kind of just a melting pot of cultures. So they were just like, we're so mixed. They're like triracial. So they didn't really, I think within that culture, they took more of a pride of being American because they didn't really know what they were. So they just had a really strong work ethic. There wasn't they didn't have a really big identity in the color of their skin, if that makes sense, because they lost so much information. So it was just, okay, well, I'm an American and I'm just going to work really hard. So growing up, my parents never really emphasized anything. They never put a lot of emphasis on this is your family culture, this is your history, this is your race. Of course, culture is important and I love talking about those things, but for me, they wanted to make sure that that was the last thing that influenced me. They want to make sure that I had an abundance of influences and that skin color, like heritage, that was the last thing that popped into my mind, because ultimately I think that when people start putting that as the first thing in their mind and filter everything through that, it just gets really messy. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that was kind
No,
of
I got you.
my upbringing with that. So
I'm honestly opposite a little bit. I'm trying to like reconnect with my cultural background a little bit more, but I would never use it as a crutch. Like I would never say like, oh, I'm not here because my parents were immigrants, or I wasn't here because we didn't have a house when I was younger. I've never used that as an excuse or anything. I
mhm.
think having culture and knowing your culture is really important, but it seems like you obviously already know like a lot about like what, or tried to, through your grandmother, like figure out what had happened and kind of hear her story and whatnot. Um, I have a question for you though, because you do
Mhm.
live in a very liberal state per se. Do you find it troubling sometimes, like when people kind of like think that your views are wrong, even though I don't think anyone's views are wrong unless they're hurting somebody else, like
Mhm.
physically. So
Yeah.
I don't want to be like, oh, your views are wrong compared to their views because you're a Republican or you're a conservative, they're Democrat. But like I feel like that climate in California, especially from what I've heard from friends and what I've seen on social media and what I've seen on the news and stuff, that it's kind of like if you're not with us, you're against us, and we don't like you, sort of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that that kind of ties into the cultural question because like even though it's not the first thing in my mind, I definitely I try to remind people, for example, my mom's side is very liberal. They're very democratic. And that's because they were told as Mexicans that the Democrats are for them, that they care about them, that they want to help them. But I don't think that they realize that Mexican culture and a lot of morals and a lot of things that we hold significant to us actually align with conservatives. For example, I'm not Catholic, but a lot of my grandma was Catholic, but a lot of Mexicans are Catholic, and so they don't believe in certain things, and so a lot of conservative values coincide with that.
Mm.
Putting family first, the nuclear family, hard work. Mexicans are very hard workers. Sometimes they come and they take the lowest of the jobs. My grandma was a cook and my other grandma cleaned houses, and they take pride in that. They take pride in working hard. And that's a lot of what conservatives believe. They believe in self-reliance. They believe in hard work, personal responsibility. And so I do get a lot of hate from my community, especially being in LA, because it is very liberal. But I always try to remind them that they don't realize that they hold a lot of conservative values. I think they've just been a lot of the times misinformed. And also, there's things like Telemundo that they only broadcast one side. And so, my grandma, who primarily speaks Spanish, she's hearing this one side biased news and she's going to take it as absolute truth. But I've kind of just gotten used to getting hate because I get it a lot in California. But I try to remind people that it's not that conservatives they're not what they think they are, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I as much as like I was telling you earlier, I obviously lean more conservative if you were to see just who I am and you see like my social media and what I talk about, but I'm not particularly in favor of a particular candidate per se. I just have certain values that I like kind of, I guess, follow, and those kind of fall on the more right leaning Republican.
Mm-hmm.
But I do agree with what you were saying about how like like people that don't understand that they have a lot of conservative views, but they consider themselves Democrats or liberals, but in reality they're more towards the right side than they are towards the left.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times it's just because, like you were saying, it's basically like everything's become very polarized, and you can't really take a if you take a step on one side, then you're with us, and if you can't go to the other side, because then you know what I mean, it's like been very separated. So like I feel like people should just be more open to thinking about things on. So like, for example, the whole thing that's going on with the election right now, like um, Joe Biden was announced the winner today, or winner president elect.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that because we gave a lot of fuel towards the Russia collusion stuff, I feel like people on the left, or people, Democrats, should give Donald Trump the benefit of the doubt, because they had a lot of hatred and spite toward, even though I know they won't, but give him like, okay, we had some problems with the election with Russia. he's having some problems. He thinks that there's going to be some sort of, there was some sort of voter fraud or whatever. Let's hear them out, because we had raised concerns for 2 or 3 years. I think that would be like the more mature thing to do, but obviously that wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
But what are your thoughts on, like, I guess the polarization of certain information, and like the divide that some people think the divide is because of Donald Trump, and some people think the divide is because of, I'm just gonna say frankly and just be really honest, some people think that the divide is more just because the left is leaning so far left that people are like, they don't know where to go, so they just kind of fall that way, you know?
Yeah. I think it's a mix of a lot of things with polarization. I mean, our founding fathers kind of predicted it. They said that that the two-party system was going to lead to a downfall, and so we're definitely seeing that. I don't think that I don't think it's new. A lot of people think, oh, it's just these past 4 years. It hasn't been. It's been ever since, we can go back all the way to 2008, and we saw that gradual shift towards the radical right and the radical left. And also, I think that the media has played a big role in it. Both sides of the media, they're not honest and truthful, and that creates a lot of distrust. And one thing with the election is, I keep saying, okay, well, it's more, I mean, obviously I do care. I would want a certain person to win, but at the end of the day, I care more about the American people's faith in the system. And so people think this is the first time we've seen uncertainties or confusion with an election, but there was Al Gore versus Bush. And so that took 36 days to resolve in a Supreme Court case. And so people need to understand, even though I don't think they will, but they need to understand that this isn't the first time that it's happened. And it's more important to restore the American people's faith in our system rather than just saying, no, I want this candidate. It's not really about that. It's about our system. But I think that the media is playing a really big divisive role, because I think people could find a common ground if they took the time to listen to each other. So, but unfortunately, it's hard.
Yeah, I think the thing is that obviously media makes money off of views, and I hope that in the near future, maybe in the next couple of years, things start to shift more towards like informational stuff it's just got such good content that you want to see it, rather than it's so dramatic that you want to see it, sort of thing. You know what I mean? Because it's
Yeah.
so easy nowadays to like when you see something like clickbaity stuff, or something that's like very, very like one way or another, and you kind of play that like group think where you kind of like stay with that side because it aligns with your values, rather than just like you were saying, kind of have like good conversations and meet somewhere in the middle. Because like like I said, I have more conservative leaning views, and there's certain things on the left that I will never agree with and that I like completely kind of denounce. But if I have a conversation with somebody, let's say a cousin or a friend of mine who's like completely on the left, and they're like, as far left as you can get, if I talk to them and I kind of reason with them and show them some evidence and some things that, if aside from saying Donald Trump's name, because once you say Donald Trump's name, like
Yeah.
automatically considered like a racist, even if you're like yourself, even if you're black or you have black African American roots. But if you just try to talk to them like on a practical level, and really try to understand where they're getting their arguments from and kind of point their flaws out, it's really hard for somebody, if you have a real conversation with them and if they're like a reasonable person, for them to disagree or to not find common ground. I think the media is the one, social media too, that's kind of like making that divide even more exponential, I guess, per se. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I wish people would just kind of take time to listen, because like you said, as soon as you mention someone's name, they just kind of shut out and they don't listen. And that's not good, because we need to just take time to listen to each other. So I try to do the same thing. I try not to mention people's names. And someone that I really look up to, his name's Amir Odom. I was talking to him about it, and I was like, how do you talk to someone who, for example, is a socialist and is like so set in their ways? And he was like, honestly, just ask them questions. Ask them why they believe the way they do. Because the more you ask them questions, the more they might not have answers or a way to answer. And they're going to reason to themselves, wait, why do I believe this? So that's kind of been my approach. It's just, okay, let me just ask them questions and let them figure it out on their own, because I'm not going to change their mind,
Yeah,
but they can change their own mind. So
definitely. It's like that. Well, you said you're dual majoring in psychology too, or
philosophy and
philosophy.
biochemistry.
So you kind of got that, like, I guess there's you probably learned stuff like that in philosophy, no?
Yeah, I've taken logic, so I actually in my logic class, I remember my professor said a lot of people take my class to learn how to argue. I'm going to teach you when not to argue. I didn't realize how handy that would come in 2020. So that's come in very handy.
No, for sure. And just like on a practical level, like there's just some people you can't talk to because you're just gonna waste your time. And I
Yeah.
feel like both of us are pretty busy people, so we don't really want to waste our time on people that don't deserve it. But when people, like you said, or whoever the person you were mentioning, I don't know who that is. I'm sure he's very famous. But when you ask people questions, like you don't even have to make an argument, because sometimes when you ask them a question, they get stuck. They're like, wait, fuck, I don't even think this out. They're like, you know what I mean? They're like,
Yeah.
I don't even know what to answer. And then they just say something completely different and then and then if there's other people in the room, they can see that you're clearly the person who knows more, because that person can't answer that question, or they
Yeah.
can't answer the question with facts or whatever. Um,
Yeah.
but I wanted to ask you another question. So you're talking about your professors, and it's kind of like a side question sort of thing, but just out of curiosity, like I hear all the time that professors are very left leaning, especially in states like yours.
Mhm.
I see it in my own school. I'm a teacher's assistant, and I'm not going to call out my professor, but the professor I work for, he's definitely left leaning, and there's definitely a lot of left leaning influence on campus. It's very unpopular to be conservative, and like I was telling you, and like I said on the podcast, I don't really care to like voice my opinion on certain things. I have my values that I believe in, and you're never going to change my mind on them. But how is that climate at school? Like, is it really bad? Is that as bad as people like conservatives say it is?
I mean, it's not as bad as Berkeley, UC Berkeley. Everyone calls it Berkeley.
Berserkly? That's funny.
It's not as
Is that like a thing?
yeah, no, everyone calls it Berkeley because it's just like it's really, really. I have a friend who goes to Berkeley, and she's super cool. Her name's Olivia, and she was just telling me about her experience. But I mean, my school's very left leaning. Thank God it's not like Berkeley, but it is very left leaning. I do have professors who it tends to be a lot of the white liberal professors. Side note,
It's
but for
funny.
example, right, like it's really interesting that pattern. But
Yeah. It's
my yeah, my professor for I had to take a philosophy class, and she's the one who taught on white privilege. She went on a rant about BLM, white privilege. She went as far as to say is if you hire a Mexican immigrant to clean your house, you are oppressing them. And I was fine. I was being quiet in her class until she said that, and that kind of just caused me to speak up and challenge her, because I don't
you
believe
fail.
that's oppression at all. That's ridiculous. I feel like it's insulting because a lot of people take pride in their work. I know my grandma took pride in her work.
Did she
So
fail you?
no, I actually
No.
got an A.
Oh, really?
So
Cool.
yeah, I debate my professors, and every class that I've debated a professor for, I've gotten an A. But I think like the key to that is just one, being respectful, and two, knowing facts. Because if you approach it with facts, there I think you gain respect from them. I don't know. That's just been my approach.
No, yeah, I feel you. That's interesting. I feel like they would kind of but I guess if you're so good that they can't deny you like a good grade, they kind of just have to, you know what I mean? Um,
Yeah. I
but
mean,
what are you saying?
yeah. I just think it's because like one of the reasons is, for example, in my political science class, we were talking about free speech, and my professor said he asked the class a question: if someone was standing on the corner of a street and they were holding up a sign that said, F Jesus and a bunch of bad things about faith, should he be allowed to continue speaking? And so we had a poll, everyone voted yes. And then he said the same thing, but about race. If he was saying racist things, should he be shut down? And everyone, like except myself and someone else, said no. And so he asked why, and he kind of went on a tangent about it, and then he opened it up to the floor, and this girl who also is a white liberal, she started saying it's bad, the oppression, racism, all this stuff. And I spoke up and I told her, as much as I don't like being called things, as much as I wouldn't want to be called a wetback or any kind of names, I'm not going to make someone be quiet just because they're hurting my feelings. That's such a slippery slope. But I think that it's because I have personal experience. I don't know why, but it usually works out in my favor every time I challenge a professor or someone else. Maybe I'm just lucky. Maybe, but
Maybe it's
yeah.
just because you're too badass. They can't keep up with you.
I don't know. I don't know.
Are you the
God,
type of
like,
person to like when you're in the class debating them, are you like, you said you're like the only one to do it. So you're like the outstander or whatever.
yeah, I think, but I think that there's people who, like, for example, we were talking about communism one time and everyone was scared to say it was bad. And I think that as soon as one person says, hey, I don't know about this sounds kind of crazy, or just questions it, I think more people will have the boldness to say something, because that's what I've noticed. Like, for example, when I did that in my poli-sci class, one of the guys sitting behind me raised his hand and he was like, hey, I hate to say it, but I actually agree with her. And then he gave his reasons why. And he was in the military, and so he gave his background. Um, but yeah, I think that once one person says it, it kind of encourages everyone else to kind of speak up. Not every time. There's times when I'm just like alone. But I think there's more people who just want to know reasons, and they just don't know who to ask because everyone's so biased in college. So
Do you think so? So you think that your school, like, if you were to go in there with a more of like I don't know, a mindset that wasn't so fixed on what you are, because it's important. Obviously, it's important to want to learn and grow, obviously, and like learn new things and whatnot. But for people that are out there that kind of, I guess, quote unquote, confused, do you think it's like really easy for them to follow to that side because they're like kind of pulling them this way, sort of thing?
yeah, definitely, because professors, they look at them in a position of power, in a position of, I mean, they have their PhD. These are hardworking people, so they assume that they have the answers. For example, one of my professors I was talking to in my philosophy class, he said, well, Plato believed that the cure to a lot of things was education. And I told my professor, well, not all the time does education work. I mean, for example, Hitler wanted to educate everyone and brainwashed everyone. So education isn't always the key, but a lot of students don't realize that. They kind of just trust their professor and hope that they're telling them the truth, when a lot of the times it's really biased and they just don't realize it. So
Definitely. No, I think that the key, I don't know if you'd agree with me on this, but I think that the key to like success as a nation is to focus more on individuals, and that kind of leans more towards the conservative views. Like you were saying, like education might not always be the best for everybody, and you hit on a good point too. So like when your professor was talking about Hispanic Americans going and working for, cleaning houses or whatever, right? For example, and she made it like I guess, an insult to Hispanic Americans, saying that it's bad for them and whatnot. What she fails to realize is that, first of all, sometimes that's all a person wants, like you were saying with your grandma or whatnot, and whatever. My family has done the same. But what she also fails to realize is that a lot of these immigrants that do these shit jobs, quote unquote, like they take advantage of where the position that they're at, and they become, they start to gain skills by whatever that be, maybe reading books or networking or just wanting to be better, or maybe having some experience back in the country that they're from, and they leverage that position that they were in. And instead of just cleaning houses, now a lady who was cleaning houses for 5 years bought, I don't know, a bunch of cleaning supplies in a van, and now she has 2 employees that clean half of her clientele's house, and she cleans 2 more. And then in 5 years from then she has 6 people that work under her. Now she has her own business in, house cleaning or whatever, for example. My uncle did it in carpentry and doing tile and stuff like that. So
yeah.
you're never in the bad position forever. And to say something like that, I feel like is very irresponsible, because like I was just saying before, someone could make it their livelihood. It doesn't mean that they're going to be physically cleaning the entire house all the time. It can transform into something else. And it has for so many people. There's people that started doing AC units, like I said, flooring, house cleaning, maybe like giving someone a ride, being a taxi driver, but then they buy their first car. Now they do private rides for people that make a lot of money, and now they're making, 6 figures. So
Yeah.
I feel like the immigrant mentality, for the most part, for most immigrants, is hard work. And when they try just a little bit, when they try to, put themselves in better positions, a lot of the times it works out really well,
Yeah, yeah, definitely. That same professor tried to say that the American dream wasn't real too. After she had said the comment about the house cleaning, and it's really weird the way they think. Because my other grandma, she picked cotton, and she took a lot of pride in that because like that was her job. And like you said, it's not the only point. My grandma works in a hospital, so it's definitely they work up. A lot of people do so.
Yeah, definitely. I was going to ask you too, in your opinion on like the economic side of, I guess, politics, because we're kind of talking more about like race and whatnot. And obviously you're known for having a strong political views. Like, do you get into the economic? Because that's more where I'm conservative and where it matters to me. Because like,
Mhm.
I don't know, I'm interested in, as I have my own business that in the fitness industry, but I also work for an insurance company, and I'm probably going to work for them after I graduate, just until the business kind of like picks off, like, picks up to where it can sustain myself, blah blah. So I'm interested in like the financial services and that type of industry. What's your thoughts on like economic policy? Do you kind of get into that, or are you more like on the race relations sort of stuff?
I mainly started talking about the racial tension issues. I have an interest there. My dad's in business. He actually started a barbecue catering business.
Oh, nice.
So hearing his perspective on it, in California we have insane tax laws and all kinds of stuff. So I'm definitely, it's not my specialty at all. I still have so much to learn in that aspect. But yeah, for I haven't really dabbled too much in it. I just know that when it comes to taxes, I don't want a lot. I want to limit it as much as possible. And I'm very pro capitalism, but I definitely have a lot to learn in that area. So I haven't dabbled too much in it.
Why do you think that low taxes are like good, for example? Like, what's your opinion?
Um, because, well, for a few different reasons. For me, mainly because I was in the kind of the healthcare area for a while. I would hear a lot about universal healthcare, and so that directly relates to increasing taxes. And so when I look at places like Canada, different countries, and how high their taxes are, I just feel like if people are working hard, you're stealing from the people. Like taxation is theft. If someone's working hard and that's their money, you shouldn't be taking it away because they won't always get that money back. I don't believe in absolutely zero taxes. I definitely believe that we do need to tax a little bit for certain things like public transportation, different things, but I'm just as limited as possible only because I want.
I lost her. I lost Noelle. That was a very good conversation. Noelle wanted to leave, so I had to ask her to come back. No, I'm just kidding. Her Wi-Fi went out, but she was kind of talking about capitalism and what she agrees on with taxes and whatnot. I think that's what we're talking about. So Noelle, if you want to kind of jump back into that and talk about the whole taxation stuff, and what you kind of think and what's your beliefs about that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I just for me it's limited taxes, and in capitalism minorities have the ability to kind of move up in the ladder, and the socioeconomic ladder, whereas if you go to a place that's socialist, for one example, one of my friends is from Venezuela, you're kind of just stuck. Like I made a post about socialism, and basically I described it as, if say you're taking a really hard chemistry class, and someone at first the teacher's like, okay, the average is going to be everyone's grade, so the first exam everyone does great, but then as people realize they don't have to try as hard, the average goes lower and lower and lower. So no matter if I study for an A, the average is still going to be a D. So that's where I'm stuck at. So that's how I try to explain socialism to people. So because the minorities benefit from capitalism a lot, especially Hispanics that open up their own businesses or do a lot of independent work, truck driving. Just it really allows people to thrive. So yeah, that's where I'm at with that. I have a lot of more reading to do on that topic.
No, it's all good. I feel like the same, like what you're saying. If I've never met somebody who's done everything they could to pursue what they want to do in life and not accomplish that, like, I've met people that have talked about it and have said that they did, but then you go and you see what they do on the weekends or what they do on a day to day. And it's like, yeah, you work for like 30 minutes or 1 hour. Like you don't really put in the effort towards it. So
Mhm.
no matter what, I feel like the only person that knows if you're truly working hard is you and God. Like no one really knows. So it's
Yeah.
kind of, and that's it, it kind of just plays out. Like even people that work really hard and they have, let's just say the economy crash or something happens, they always find ways to overcome these things. And the
Mhm.
system that I truly believe is the only system that'll ever work is capitalism, because like you were saying, socialism, communism obviously is the extreme. Um, they just promote a sense of security in life that is not always secure. And it's good that it's not always secure. Like we need to have a sense of fear. We need to have a sense of, feeling like if we don't work hard, we're not going to be able to eat, because that's when we perform our best. When we
Mhm.
feel like we have some sort of like, I guess, backbone or something to support us always, then we know we'll always like hinder our amount of growth we can do, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think a lot of people, like a lot of my friends, don't see an issue with socialism. They think that capitalism is the devil, and they like to
Dang.
cite like Denmark, Switzerland, France, Finland, but they don't realize that all of those countries, including Denmark, they have a free market, whereas even Denmark doesn't have a minimum wage. They tax about one third of their salary. They get one third taxed. So it's just, no society has a fully functional, successful socialist economy. Like no society has that. And until I see that, I definitely don't want to hear. So
And if you look at the statistics for, and you just look in general, I feel like, and not that I feel like this is, a lot of this is facts, a lot of the most innovative projects and the most innovative companies come from the United States. And I'm not just saying this because we're the best country in the world, because we are, but
yeah,
and why does it work? Because we are one of we are a country that tries in many ways. I know there's a lot of people that pull on the other side, but in the most part, many people don't know, but they're capitalists at heart and they act in a capitalist society. Obviously, our economy isn't capitalism to its finest. There's a lot of socialistic policies and programs in our economy, but
yeah,
for the most part, I think we lean more towards capitalism, and we're one of the best, and we are the best when it comes to overall, aside from whatever people want to tell you with this election and all this stuff going on, we have the best standard of living, in my opinion, in the majority of our country. We have
mhm,
the best mobility. That's why they call it the American dream. While we do have corruption in our government, it's not to the point to where we can bribe officials or, it's not like the government controls us to the point of like some European states where, like I'm seeing stuff on lockdowns and stuff where they can't even open their own business; they'll get arrested. Over here, at least we have the freedom to, people have gotten arrested because of, opening their gym and stuff like that, but they've used social media and whatever other means to get themselves out of these things. I don't see this happening in many other countries, and I know it's not happening in other countries. And me and you both know that the countries that we're both from, our parents were from, Mexico, for example, Peru, Vietnam, for me, those countries are all corrupt. Like there's a lot of things that happen on a small scale to where even the police officers are getting bribed and they're getting, all this nonsense that we don't have here. And a lot of people don't see that these things are gifts. They're literally gifts to us. Like we could be living in countries like that to where we have no freedom. We have no, ability to speak on what's on our mind. We can only, and I think that's why so many people like yourself are advocating more towards pushing back towards the agenda that I guess the Democratic Party is starting to want to push, because they don't want to see the freedoms being lost. And that's why I understand sometimes, like sometimes I think that conservatives can overdo it, but at the same time, I'm like, I know why we're doing this, because we're being pulled so far to the left with people like AOC. Um,
oh my gosh, don't even get me started on AOC. I can't stand her.
but yeah, I'll
Yeah.
stop talking, but I'll give you a little bit more of an opportunity to speak. So like, what's your opinion on like the next couple years in politics, and like what do you think is going to happen? You think we're going to be more divided, more, come together, rather not in like a hopeful stance, like I guess mindset, like I want everyone to come together, I want us to all find a common ground, but like in a realistic mindset, I don't know.
Mhm.
I don't know what's going to happen. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I want to be optimistic. In an ideal world, I would love for us to go back to when we had Republican presidents and Democrat vice presidents, and we found a common ground in patriotism. But honestly, I mean, it really depends on this election. I feel like if it goes to the Supreme Court and it gets overturned, which I really don't know if that's going to happen, but if it does, chaos is just going to break loose, kind of how we were talking about earlier. And the left is not going to be happy, and it's going to be chaos. At the same time, if there is no if they don't challenge, if the president just concedes, I think that it's going to create even more distrust in our system, and people are not going to trust future elections. So honestly, either way it goes, I feel like our country's going to be divided. But what I was telling a friend was, honestly, it's up to us as the individuals. A president at this point cannot. I don't feel like a president could unite us. Um, so I feel like it's honestly up to us on an individual basis to be that change, because yeah, it's really polarized at this point.
Yeah, and that's what it comes down to. At the end of the day, it always comes down to that, the individual, what you're doing for yourself, what you're doing for the people that are close around you. Because if everybody worked, I think Milton Friedman said something like this, and I've been saying this too for a while. I don't know, do you know who Milton Friedman is?
Yeah.
He said something like, if everybody just worked on themselves, the world would have to be a better place. Because it's true. Like if I
Mhm.
was trying to be the best version of me, and Noelle, who lives in California, is trying to be the best version of her, and whoever, Jimmy, who lives in Utah, is trying to be the best version of himself, for the most part, people have good aspirations and good. Obviously, there's outliers that have they want to do bad things, but like for the most part, if everyone just works on being the best version of themselves, if the whole world does that, which is like obviously impossible, then we'd have to be a better place. And I think it starts with local communities trying to get people around you motivated to try to do better things and try to be more honest and open with their issues and just be more responsible with what they do too. I feel like personal responsibility is something that's going to be taken away with if we start to go more towards that socialistic sort of communistic whatever that people want to start.
Yeah.
Personal responsibility is huge because at the end of the day, we can talk policy, we can talk all these things, we can talk about money, tax, blah, blah. But if you don't have some sort of vision, you don't have a goal in mind, you don't have it's either a set career or business you want to start or something you want to do to carry you through your life, and you don't have a path that you're going to do that, then it doesn't matter who's president. You're kind of screwed. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. If your life sucks, it's your fault. It's
Yeah,
no one else's fault except yours.
exactly.
Uh, yeah. When people complain about that, I just point them to Booker T. Washington. He was a slave and he became an educator. Like, how much more struggle can you have and still be successful? Like, if you're complaining and you don't like your life, that's no one's fault but yours. Like, everything comes down to personal responsibility.
What do you think about this? Because like a lot of times, okay, so a lot of the arguments I'll hear from conservatives is that, okay, if I did it, let's just say, not me, but let's say an African American, I don't know if you know a guy named Officer Tatum.
Yeah.
He's on YouTube. So like he talks about his personal story about him coming out of the hood and him like, rising up and becoming a law enforcement officer and all this stuff. Um, so if what do you think? If one person can do it, do you think everyone can do it? Because that's not. If you give that argument to somebody, then they say, "Oh no, they're just lucky," or "No, no, 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 it was an anomaly." There is, systemic racism. There is biases. If you're an immigrant, all this stuff.
Yeah.
What's your personal beliefs on that? You think if one person can do it, everyone can do it? Because I honestly believe that too. But some obviously people have different opinions.
100%. I think that anyone's capable of doing it. And the reason being is when people bring up systemic racism, like I have a friend from LA from here, and she brought up systemic racism and she tried to tell me, well, look at the schools we went to, because I didn't go to a good school. She was like, we didn't go to a good school, so that's because of systemic racism. And that's because of the color of our skin. Well, no, someone who's poor and who's white and grows up in a rural area, they're going to have the same experience. So I definitely don't think systemic racism is a thing at all. I always ask people for proof, and they can never give me proof of systemic racism. But one thing that I like to point out to people is, for example, my dad's from South Central LA. He's grew up without a dad. mixed kid. His mom picked cotton. Like, he came from nothing, and he decided to become a police officer. And now he works for a school district. He owns a business. And so he did that all on his own and by the grace of God. And so I definitely think anyone with hard work can accomplish anything. My dad had all the statistics, all the numbers, everything against him, and he still did it. So that's definitely what I point people to.
Yeah, someone might say, well, like you're just lucky that you had this opportunity. What would you say to someone like that?
I would ask them, well, why do you think you don't? Because most of the time they're either going to say superficial talking points or they're not going to know why. Because anyone,
What are those talking points? Like what have you heard before?
the one thing that I've heard a lot is the systemic racism and the race card. Well, oh, white privilege. I think those are just the most common ones that I hear. Is systemic racism and white privilege. And for those things, there's nothing that backs up their claims. There's no statistic, nothing. I mean, if you have less money, yeah, it's going to be harder, but it's not impossible. Like, that's the thing. I'm not saying it's not going to be hard. Like, yeah, it's going to be hard. You're going to have to work so hard. You're going to have it. You might fail a few times, but nothing ever came easy. And that's what my dad always told me growing up. Nothing that's worth it ever comes easy. You're going to have to work hard. You might have to work harder than the wealthy white person, but that doesn't mean anything. That's fine. If anything, you're going to appreciate it more. So.
Definitely. I think it's cooler to like work harder. Like, you know what I mean? I feel like at the end of the day, like it's more fulfilling and it looks better. Who cares what other people think? But anyways, it looks better on the outside too. Like if you
Yeah,
come from nothing and become something, then if you have come from, you already have stuff and then you become more successful.
definitely.
But I want to talk on like one last point before we close out the podcast because it is getting kind of late for me. But I wanted to ask you your opinion on your career field because you want to get into the law. Um, where do you think that you're gonna go in the next like 5 years, and what do you think like your path or what's your goals for I guess the years to come, and what do you see in like your industry, which would be law because we kind of talked about it, but not really too much.
Yeah, I definitely, well, the plan is to apply to law school. And after law school, I want to use that law background to run for Congress.
Mhm.
And I definitely want to work on one, I want to be a voice for young conservative females. And I want to offer a different perspective given my background, because diversity is diversity of thought, not skin color. So that's definitely what I want to do with that. And I don't, that's the plan right now. That's where I see myself in 5 years, is going to law school and then running for Congress. There's definitely a lot of issues that I want to work on, and a lot of them are minority issues, and I just have a different way of solving them than the Democrats, because I don't think they've really helped our communities, especially in California. So that's where I see myself in 5 years.
Do you plan to stay in California?
Um, I would love to. However, it is dark blue, like very, very deep blue. So I don't think I would have a chance
Yeah.
in California. So I'm definitely, for law school, the plan is to go to East Coast. I love DC. I've
Nice.
only been there once. I got to go with Blexit. So that was really cool. I got to march for they had a Back the Blue rally, and then I got to go to the White House and
Oh,
hear the
you
president.
went?
Yeah. Yeah, I got to hear him speak. That was amazing.
Did you
But
get to meet Officer Tatum?
he was like 2 feet in front of me. I was too shy to like ask for a picture, but he was
Really?
right in front of me. Yeah,
My sister is like in love with him. She loves his content.
he's great. It was really cool to hear him speak. He like prayed before he marched. My personal favorite of seeing though for that whole event was Larry Elder, because to me he's like the modern day MLK. I look up to him so much. He has so much wisdom. But yeah, that was really cool. So I'm probably gonna go to law school over there, and then probably run either on that side of the country or maybe where my family's from, which is Texas.
Nice. Yeah, there's a big exodus from California, I feel like for Republicans. A lot of
Yeah,
people are moving to Texas.
yeah.
A lot of
But
people are
it's
moving.
turning like blue, which is sad. So we need it.
Yeah. A lot of people are moving to Texas and a lot of people are moving to Florida too. I think I'm
Hmm.
gonna stay right here in Florida. I like Florida. But
I'm actually going to be there in December.
oh really? Where?
I think it's Palm Beach. I've never been.
Anyways, guys, so that was a great podcast. We talked on a lot of different things, and it was a pleasure having Noelle on. I want to have her plug her social media links. You guys can definitely go check her out if you guys want to see her stuff. So you can plug your stuff up. What do you got?
I have Instagram at Noelle Fitch. You can just look up Noelle Fitchett. I'm like the only Noelle Fitchett on Instagram.
In the
And
world
TikTok
ever.
is Noelle Fitchett. It's really weird. I'm the only Noelle Fitchett. If you look up my name, all my socials will come up. So it's really easy to find me. But yeah, thanks for having me. It was super fun.
Oh, no worries. I wanted to ask you too. So are you planning on doing anything like on like YouTube or anything like that in the future? Or are you just trying to stay on those platforms for the limited amount of time or like whatever amount of time?
Right now, I mean, TikTok's been pretty successful. So I might make the transition to YouTube. It just depends on where the app goes. I kind of like the 60-second format because I can fit a lot of just facts in there and people can just share it, and it's super easy for people to share. Where YouTube, you kind of have to like sit there and watch. So
Yeah.
we'll see, maybe in the future, but right now I just have Instagram and IGTV. I do stuff on there too.
Got you. Well, anyways, Noelle, it was a pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for having this conversation with us. Hopefully we'll do it sometime in the future. For Noelle Fitchett, I'm Matt Wynn, aka Oldschool Matt. See you guys later. Peace. Hey guys, thank you guys for checking out this video. We're so grateful to have you here on our YouTube channel. So make sure to check out all of our other videos ranging from a variety of different type of podcasts to our Buffalo barbecues. Check out our YouTube channel for constant updates on all the stuff that we have going on. You can also follow us on social media like Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. So check us out there. Water Buffalo Training Method, we're out.